Hello and welcome. Today I will show you how to implement a simple demolition system in Unity like what you see here. And you only need three things for that. First, some meshes you want to drag or deform. And as a side note, skinned meshes won't work, so it's not applicable to characters. Second, a free mesh tool from the asset store. And three, one or two simple scripts that will do the work. So let's get started. First of all, here's the free Deform tool from the asset store. It's really cool and I will show you what you can do with it, and you find the link in the description. So here we are on Unity and I already added some assets that I want to deform. But first of all, we have to install the Deform tool if you haven't done so far. So go to the package manager, then go to My Assets and search for Deform. For sure, first of all, you have to add it to your assets on the asset store, but it's free, so it's not a big deal. Then download it and import it, and during the import it will also install some dependency like the burst compiler. Then go back to your scene after installation, then you can go to Tools, Deform, and open the Creator window. You can tuck it here to the left, and the Creator window will give you access to all the different deformers that come with the tool. So what you have to do is select the object you want to deform and then add a component called deformable. Now you see you get some errors. Read-write permission must be enabled on the target mesh. You can simply click fix it here, but I want to show you what it does. So you have to select your mesh and then the import file. Here you have to read-write enable and then you have to apply it. Now you can go back and the error is gone and you can clear your console. Close these. Now we want to deform the helicopter. So select the helicopter in the hierarchy and then select one of the deformers in the creator window. For instance, I'm using the Perlin noise. So I click on the Perlin noise. What it does, it first of all creates a new game object as a child to your helicopter. And this game object has the Perlin noise deformer script attached to it. At the same time, it assigns this Perlin noise deformer to the list of deformers on your game object. But so far you don't see any changes in the mesh. And this is because all the deformers are set to neutral, so not changing anything as the default. So in this case, for instance, the scale of the noise is set to 0. So if I increase it, you will see that the mesh starts to deform. And you also see it's very sensitive. And it can easily look very ugly, especially as this is a low poly object. So I recommend that you play around with the different deformers and the parameters and see what works for your objects. There are some settings up here that might be important to you. For instance, the update mode is set to auto. That means as soon as I'm changing anything on the parameters, it will update the mesh. If I set this to pause and then change anything here, you will see the mesh is not updated. But if I set it to auto again, then you see it will update the mesh. You can also change the collider if this is necessary. So if I set this to auto, it will ask for the mesh collider. So you can assign the mesh collider to this and it will automatically update the mesh of the collider as well. And you also have the options down here to either save it as an object file or as an asset file. So this will create a new mesh, a deformed mesh that you then can reuse. So if you don't want to dynamically change your mesh or deform your mesh, you can create an asset here and then put it somewhere into your scene. For my scene, I use two different deformers. The one is on this car, the bend deformer. So you can bend at some angles and some position. And the other is the Perlin noise deformer. Like here I have some different deformers that could be of interest. For instance, this lattice deformer, you can define the resolution, so the different anchor points here. And then, for instance, you can move them around and the mesh is deformed accordingly. This is less usable for randomly deforming the mesh, but if you want to upfront define how your mesh is deformed upon impact. The next one is the twirl. So this could be used to simulate a kind of dent or very local impact, disabling the mesh collider so you can see it better. You can easily deform it too much, but again, you can play around with the parameters on your own meshes. So the last one I'm using here is the magnet, and you can also use it to create some local dance. Now let's look at the demolition system I implemented. There are different ways you can do it, and you will probably do it in a different way, but you can take the core elements from my simple implementation. I allow any object in the scene to be hit by a bullet and then be deformed, but you might limit it to specific objects. So as a first step, I change all my meshes in the scene to be read-write enabled. Secondly, I have a simple script that adds my object impact handler to any mesh in the scene. As said, you can do it differently, but the real work is done by the object impact handler. The script checks whether the object was hit by a bullet and then dynamically attaches a deformable and a deformer to the object. I'm using the observe character controller and this sends an event to the object that was impacted by a weapon. If you are not using the controller, you can completely ignore this upper part of the script. Instead, for instance, you can check for a collision or do your own raycast. So for instance, you can check whether the other object was a bullet, and then we need the position of the impact. I simply take the first contact point in the array, but you probably have to loop over all contact points and check which contact point refers to the bullet object. We need the position of the impact because we want to spawn the deformer at that location. I then start a coroutine to wait for a small time span until I deform the object. Otherwise, it will look strange in the scene when the object is deformed before you even hear the shot or see some smoke. So I wait for the time and then I call deform object with the position of the impact. In the deform object method, I first check whether a deformable has been already assigned, because I allow the object to be impacted several times by a bullet. If there's no deformable, I add the deformable. And then I set the update mode to auto. That means the mesh is automatically deformed if I assign a new deformer. Then I check whether a deformer has been already assigned to the object. And if yes, I'm removing it from the deformable and destroy the deformer. That means I'm not adding up new deformers, but I'm removing the old one, and there's always only a single deformer on the object. And then I randomly assign one of two deformers. I'm using the bend deformer or the Berlin noise deformer. So in the first case, I use the bend deformer. I create the new object. Then I take the component and randomly assign an angle between -45 and 45 degrees. I set the position of the transform to the position of the impact. I set a random rotation around the y-axis to this transform, add the deformer to the deformable, and at the end set the transform of the object as the parent to the deformer. For the Berlin noise deformer, I'm just setting a fixed magnitude scalar to 0.25, but I also could set a random value here. After creating and assigning the deformer, I start another coroutine to wait for the end of the frame. At that time, the mesh is deformed, and then I set the update mode to pause or the update to false on the deformer, because I only want the mesh to be deformed once and then the code doesn't have to run again. There are also some deformers that are time dependent, so they need to be updated every frame to create waves or other effects. But in our case, I just want one static change of the mesh. So that's basically it. You just need some meshes, the Deform tool, and a few lines of code. So now have fun implementing your own demolition system. And please share your ideas in the comments.